check and see what, anyone in the pipeline here? Are we good? Good for now? All right. Well, I guess we can get started here. Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name's Brian White. I'm with the City of Holland Transportation Services Department. I'd like to recognize a few folks here today. Mark Gibson from the BPW, there in the black. Brian Holloman, consultant from OMM Engineering. We have Mark Cornelius here, city planner from the CNS department. So thanks for those folks be here tonight. I've got some slides prepared that we'll go on through. And looks like we have about 10 folks in attendance through the YouTube channel. So we'll try and keep you guys plugged in. If you do, go ahead and we'll try and keep that chat box available and keep that monitored. So if you do have questions, by all means, let's try and utilize that. We'll try and answer those tonight if technology will cooperate with us. And then there will be a time at the end, too, for folks in the audience for a question and answer. So why don't we get right to it? Again, Mark from the BPW, myself from the City of Holland. Joint project, utilities and road infrastructure along 10th Street. Agenda for tonight, we'll go through PowerPoint, about 26 slides with that, so not too bad. Go over project limits and the location map. Tentative schedule at this point. We'll talk in some detail about scope, what all's involved. We do have some conceptual sketches we'd like to share with folks. Some of that stuff, I'll warn you, the conceptual sketches, a pretty fine detail, may not come through real good on the screens here. We're recording this, so the YouTube channel, you can always reference that video at the same link if you want to take a closer look at stuff. And then also feel free to contact our department at the transportation office and we can get you a copy of the PowerPoint too. Some snowmelt options, basically just reviewing a base map. Certainly possibilities there, but yet to be determined. We'll have a question and answer for the group, and also check that chat box with the YouTube. And then for folks, particularly those who are along the route, we'll have some one-on-one time where we have some maps here that we can go over in more detail for those folks who live right along the route. So with that, we'll get going. So this is the project limits, basically 10th Street as a whole. We've got Raalte Avenue on the west end and Lincoln Avenue on the east end. We're looking to go down College Avenue to the south just a bit to that mid-block crosswalk, and then to the north on Columbia Avenue up to 9th Street. So that's basically the limits of the project. Timeline, again, pretty open at this point, but I'll work ourselves from backwards. We're trying to target the 2021 construction year. So we're doing all the planning now. Trying to hit a wintertime letting. There is funding program for this project, so it's going to go through MDOT, Michigan Department of Transportation. We've got a few different visits and opportunities for additional public comment. Right now we're in this initial meeting here. Going to be working on design. We do intend to have a field trial with a potential cycle track. So we'll just do that with tape and cones and barriers and have that out there for probably a week or so to get some input from the public on how they liked it. And then we'll put things back to normal after that trial. I expect that trial will occur sometime mid-August. And we want to kind of coordinate that with Hope College and right after they get back into to session, which is earlier this year. Then after that field trial, we'll have another public meeting. Hopefully we'll be in a a place where we can have more folks attend in person, that would be great. But we'll play it by ear. And then, again, finalize the design, get things out to bid. And then with the construction, again, planning on construction after May. Plan to be at the the east end first, over by the college, and then work our way to the west, with us finishing out the project by Raalte there. So probably be broken down in a few different phases. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mark. He's going to talk about the utility stuff with the BPW. Thanks.
The existing utilities in 10th Street can be accurately described as a bit historic. But even with that, parts and pieces, a lot of the intersections have been replaced over the years. So throughout the project limits, we have pretty decent valves, and the main is yet to show a lot of the problems that we would expect of utilities of this age. So right now we're going to start with a focus on replacing the sanitary sewer in that block between College and Columbia. This allows us to rehab a sewer that we've been starting to experience problems with. And we're going to scope out during design extending that sewer replacement over to Central to meet up with the Central project that was completed a few years ago. For the water main, the only section of water main that we see having to be replaced at this point is the railroad crossing over by Lincoln. It's older, so it's a little undersized, and as this project crosses that railroad, we would want to take this opportunity to improve that water service at the far end of Lincoln. With the utility work, we will have to be doing water service work. And what this comes from is a few years ago, the state of Michigan and EGLE, the new face of DEQ, have passed some regulations that water services connected to lead-containing components have to be replaced all the way into the home, up to the meter. So with the historic main in this area, there's a fair amount of water services that still have that tap at the main that it contains lead. So we will be targeting that portion of the project to focus on water service replacements. That is a kind of a multi-step process. That's where we get really involved. We'll be developing a list through design for all the homeowners that we need to get in contact with, because there is an agreement, because we are entering your home and performing work on your house. So we will be in contact. This is all this water service work, per the regulations of the state, is completed at no cost to the homeowner. So there is no cost associated with this work for what we're doing. Yes, question from the audience.
All the way up and into the house?
We have to go all the way to the meter. So what that sometimes involves is, depending on the orientation of the house and the water service, we may need to come and relocate the meter within the house. And we take care of all that work ourselves, so that when we walk away, the house is still functioning completely the same as before we showed up.
Put a new gooseneck down by the street, then too.
Yes, yeah. It's now, so a lot of these water taps, our records go back to as early as 1904 on some of the homes. And so everything now since 2012 is no lead brass taps in the water main. It's copper. We use K copper all the way into the houses. And so part of that process is just dealing with the homeowners on where that new service comes in. What's your internal plumbing going to look like when we get done with setting a new meter and then running a water line back to where the old meter used to be, and some of those steps. Currently, the best technique that we are finding works out well is directional drilling. And takes about 15 minutes at sometimes, and they'll drill in, pull in your new line, seal the wall, and then we have to just bring in a plumber to finish the rest of the plumbing work. Pretty non-invasive. So far, a lot of people actually have found that it brings an increase of service because the older galvanized steel lines had started to close off, and so you'd see a drop in pressure service at the house. And so this seems to bring a better, more reliable service to the homes.
So similar to the power that you've been running through tubes, they've been boring that through, very accurate.
It's quite often the same contractor. So, this will take place over the full course of the project, and that'll probably be the most intensive part of the BPW's participation.
All right. It's only going to Washington Boulevard and 21?
That's the pictorial.
Yeah,
what was
water
that?
limits, hang on a second.
Well, project limits.
Oh,
So-
project limits or water main limit?
Water.
Water main limits?
So
Yeah, let's back up a couple slides here.
Going 11th to 10th Street, or Washington Boulevard.
I sketched this in for the project limits, but
That's service work.
Yeah, so we will be evaluating all the services where the street is being reconstructed. So if we mill around corners and such, we do try to get to every service that is affected. That was just
Got it.
a preliminary scope that we're working with. So as project limits move, our service work moves too.
Okay. So, again, if there's any question, I didn't see anything pop through on chat. But again, anything comes through utility related, just, and you're on the chat, go ahead and send those questions through and we'll try and answer them tonight. Okay, so then moving on here, we do intend to redo storm sewer along with the roadway. Storm sewer is quite vintage, similar to the utilities, 100+ years. One of the things that we're going to be doing, we are doing right now, is our camera trucks going through all the existing storm sewer and just evaluating that. And what we're looking for too is just any kind of blind connection or sump pump connections, things like that. We want to make sure that stuff all gets reconnected. Those of you in the audience, those of you at home, if you know of a sump pump connection, just make sure we're aware of it so that we can get that reconnected. If you're already connected, that's on us to go ahead and make sure you're reconnected to our new system. If you do have desires in the future to, connect downspouts or sump pumps or something like that from your property, certainly get in touch with us. Now would be a great time to do that as part of the project. And we do try and build some flexibility into the project. We typically sleeve most of the driveways so that we can get lines from properties tapped into the back of catch basins and not blind tapped into the main. So much easier to troubleshoot any potential problems in the future if you know where that connection is and can actually observe it by looking through a catch basin. So, so that's how we'll set up the project. And again, the owner would be responsible for any new connections. We'd like you to get the work done on private property, get it out to us, and then we'll get it plugged in. Non-motorized components. So want to spend a little bit of time talking about this aspect of the project. Not necessarily utility related, but it's definitely part and parcel to what the end product looks like. And a couple of things that are factoring into what we're looking at. And again, it's conceptual at this point, but obviously over the course of the next few months and that trial that we want to do, that's going to help inform the final design. But we've got some studies on the books, some past work that's been done that's identified 10th Street as a pretty good east-west corridor for non-motorized traffic. And so we did that with the downtown traffic study a few years back. where that got identified. And then back in 2006, when the city put out their bike and ped plan, 10th Street was also identified during that study as a good east-west corridor. So we're evaluating several conceptual designs here. We have some sketches, and again, this is where it gets kind of fine with the details, but we'll see once what we can do. So there is what we'll call a cycle track alternative. And basically that is a on-street facility that basically handles two-way bike traffic. Right here, we're actually proposing that that be on the south side of 10th Street. You can see it's kind of highlighted in the lighter gray here. What would the end result here basically would be there'd be parking on the north side with the cycle track on the south side. Raalte Avenue is north-south here. So that's the west end of the project, and then we basically move to the east from here, this being Washington, Maple, and Pine Avenue, River Avenue, Central College, and then the next slide will have Columbia on it. But you can see this cycle track carrying through here. Not entirely sure how we're gonna treat the intersections with that concept. That's still somewhat of a work in progress. But this is the alternative that we intend to trial out in the field in August. And again, we intend to do that just on a trial basis, with cones and tape and things like that we'll put out there for a week, and then we'll go ahead and remove it. And hopefully we'll get some input from folks at that follow-up public meeting on the uptake there, whether folks liked it or didn't like it. So that's one alternative that we want to put in the field and give it a shot. Again, mid-August timeframe, be looking for that, and we'll try and get word out as well. So that's a cycle track option. This is the end part of that. And again, Columbia here on out to Lincoln. Another option we looked at was basically bike lanes and parking on both sides. I'll just say that it ends up being a pretty wide cross-section through there when we do all that. But this just gives you a sense for what that's going to look like. Again, the green space between the curb and the sidewalk does get pretty pinched. I think we're left with about 3 to 4 feet in that order. So, again, interested in people's thoughts on that. So it's conceptual at this point, but we've laid it out and are taking a look at it. The other one, and again, don't think this is really viable, but we wanted to put it on paper just to see what it would look like, is putting a shared use path in. So this would be separated from the roadway and basically take the place of one of the sidewalk alignments. In this case, we just decided to show it on the south. You can see we virtually are left with no green space, no parkway between the south edge of the road and what would be a shared use path. So probably not going to be an alternative that we give a whole lot of consideration to. And again, this is just carrying it through. But we wanted to just get it down there, evaluate it, give it a look, and then, like I said, obviously it doesn't look like it's going to be real viable given the layout here. So the other one, and this is something that we've done in the past with Central Avenue. I happen to like this option a fair amount at this point. Again, it provides for a little bit narrower roadway. We've got the bike lanes on both sides, and then we've got parking on one side, in this case, parking on the north side. And again, this would be basically from Raalte up through, I want to get this right, Maple, where we would have that. Actually, I think we go on to the next one and get up to Pine. Again, so there'd be bike lanes, parking on the north side, no parking on the south side. We'd have that from Van Raalte to Pine, and then from Pine to the east, we'd be looking at bike lanes and parking on both sides. Obviously, the parking component's a little bit heavier and more important in this area as you get closer to downtown and things like that. So that'll take us through, get us through campus. We've got some treatments that we're working with the college on, that we'll continue to work with the college on in terms of what we want the street to do and function with within the campus area. So we're having direct discussions with those folks on that, and I'd say that's going pretty good so far. So far, so good. The other thing that I just want to acknowledge too, and I know we've had some comments from the public on it. I don't know if we're getting anything through the chat, nothing through the chat yet. But we want to pay particular attention to the end points here. Try and see if we can get things tied in nice and neat. So Lincoln Avenue obviously being one terminus. We want to try and get that all tied in nice together. The other terminus here, Van Raalte with the curve and all that stuff. You know, we put some effort into improvements in that intersection a few years back. It's just not a real good setup with the curve there and the traffic and everything else that's going on at that intersection. So we really want to spend some time too and look at that thing. Look at these terminuses. So certainly want to encourage public input on those. Again, we'll try and get that and place some more emphasis on that at the next public meeting. But that's something that we're going to be spending quite a bit of time looking at over the course of design on the project. Okay, and then we wouldn't be Holland without a snow melt discussion. So this is just a map of our existing system. We've got 9th Street here, 10th Street down here, and you can see we've got some fingers of the snow melt system coming down. And we're just looking at exploring opportunities with 10th Street. Again, nothing nailed down at this point, but certainly now is the time for folks. We've heard from some folks in the area, particularly the downtown area. You know, if there's certainly desire, things like that, we want to hear from you. Input, that would be great. So, like I say, we have heard from some folks, so thank you for that. But we'll continue to do that. Hey, looks like we got a chat box. Okay, which of the scenarios preserves the most trees? Is this a priority with the city? That's a good question. So we're going back to the bike lanes. And so each side of the street here obviously has got nice street trees with it. And so the narrower we're able to go on the road cross section, the more street trees become or are able to be maintained. And so that's where this bike lanes with a parking on one side alternative, let's get over to that. That basically is the narrowest cross section. Provides for the most green space there between the sidewalk and the street edge. So again, you can kind of see these trees penciled in there. And certainly we try and save as many trees as we can. It's a value added. We certainly believe that. We're a tree city. And the trees that we do take down, and there are probably going to be some, but we do intend to replace. We typically, on a reconstruct like this, have a very robust tree planting plan at the end. And I'll say that it does go at the end, you know, typically, as the schedule indicates, you know, we're completing in the early fall, you know, end of October, maybe sliding into November, but that tree program, the tree replanting, is typically through a separate contract that we'll do, and we'll do that mid to end of November. And again, you know, we've had projects where we planted 100+ trees at the end. we like it. So it's a good way to go. We think it's important. It's a good component of the project. And then we also do something too, just to try and limit the impacts of that. As we'll vector excavate the holes for that. So it's a somewhat of a neat operation. Doesn't create a whole big mess of a nice brand new clean roadway. And then we plop the trees in there and away we go. We try and be mindful of the utilities. Stay clear of those utility services that just went in there. Trees and utility services don't like each other. So we try and be mindful of that and not put one on top of the other. Is that what you're going to say?
So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yes.
I think about, on a typical reconstruct, 75% of the tree removals that happen are because we evaluate the trees beforehand with an arborist.
Ah, good point.
And we're seizing the opportunity to.
You bet. That's good. Thanks for that comment. So the comment was, and this is something we've done in the last few years, and I think it's good. We brought in an arborist from Bartlett Tree Service has been doing it for us. They do a great job. They're really conscientious folks over there, but they come through, and we actually had them through here. I don't think they quite got through the whole route yet. I think actually next week they're going to finish up, but they go through and they evaluate each street tree, give us information like size, kind of they try and qualify to the quality of the tree, the species. We found on past projects that there are some trees out there that pose a potential hazard, and so we're able to address that with the project. But then also what we can do is, if there's some really good quality trees out there, and there are, no doubt about it, we can put some things in the contract that we try and convince the contractor through those means to keep those trees. There's limitations to how much we can do with that, but we certainly will give it a look, particularly if folks have a couple in mind. Get in touch with us so you can communicate that with us, and then we'll work with you on that. But in general, we're going to try and do what we can to save the trees that we can, and then we certainly will plan to plant as many trees as we can, keeping in mind too that we just want a nice tree line look through the city there. So that's hopefully that answers the question there. Certainly doesn't rule out any of those other options. I think some of those trees can stay with some of these other options as well. But just, again, being realistic with geometry and street widths and what we're left with, so.
Hey, Brian,
Yes?
what's the width that you have for bike lanes on that bike lane construction?
Yes, so the bike lanes plus parking, so there's a 3.5-foot strip of pavement and a 1.5 curb pan to make a total of 5 from the face of curb. And that's what's out on Central Avenue. Okay. And that's on the curb side. Then on the parking side, and I apologize, this is all listed here, and feel free to stick around at the end. We do have printouts. We can go through those in more detail. But then on the parking side, we'll have a 7-foot parking bay and then a 5-foot bike lane next to that. And then that's accompanied with the 2 10-foot through lanes. And that's basically what we have out there on Central Avenue if you want to see it in person and experience it. So, okay. Any other questions come through the chat? Glad to see technology is working for us. We'll get to the last slide here. Next steps. So we hope we get some input. Hope to get that tonight or any time over the next several weeks and months. In August, coming up here quick, we intend to do this demo. We want to do that when Hope College is back in session. Then in late August, early September, we intend to have another public meeting. We're not going to be finalized with design then, but we're going to be on our way. So would encourage folks to to share their thoughts and ideas, options with us as part of that process. And then from there, we're going to get going on the design, finalize that with the idea that we're going to be bidding the project out over the course of late fall into the winter time. Any other questions from the group? Sure, hang on. We're gonna hang on a second, just for the folks that are tuning in on YouTube, and believe it or not, we got a following. How many are we up to right now? 22. Hey, that's cool. All right, do you want to just share with you?
So if I understood this correctly, you're going to have parking on both sides except for between Washington Boulevard and Van Raalte, is that true?
Yeah.
Pine and Van Raalte?
Yes. 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 That and again, that can change, right? We certainly want to hear everyone's input. Parking, everyone views parking a little differently. What we also want to do is we'll probably get out there with a use study too and just see what the usage rate is of on-street parking, particularly in those areas at the west end where we would propose to only have it on one side, just to make sure that we're not missing anything. I've been through there a fair amount over the last several weeks. Haven't seen a whole lot of on-street parking, but again, we want to give it its due.
That'd be eliminating 60 parking spaces then. That'd be eliminating 60 parking spaces.
60 parking spaces.
Between Pine and Van Raalte.
Yeah, so, again, that's something that we can quantify, right? We'll check your number. But yeah, we're looking at something on that order. Sure.
I just was gonna speak to sort of what Ed is saying, but.
Yep.
I guess the reason it isn't just part of the parking issue, I think the reason is being in that neighborhood, only having one side, so losing the space. But then we're talking about increasing density with some housing projects that are coming down the line, so then we're losing it. Boatworks requires their employees to park along 10th or along Van Raalte if there's space, so they're coming in. So we're already kind of losing spaces as it is, so to say 60, that might not sound like a big deal, but there's some projects coming down the line that are going to be affordable housing that's going to be directly affecting that. So to take away but then add density, I think that's where the issue comes in.
Sure. Yep, and so thank you for that comment. And again, that's something that we've got to weigh, right? And then so and these are, the tried and true questions that we get into. So then one of the alternatives may be going back to parking on both sides, right? And either doing a cycle track or doing bike lanes, right? But then you're talking about, okay, so what are those tree impacts then, right? So you kind of, that's the kind of thing that we'll want to flush out as we move forward, and we'll want to get input on as we go. Because that's where the rubber meets the road, right? So, yep.
Is there funds coming for this bike path, or is that the city's just bearing that all?
Yeah, so there is some outside funding that's coming from, it's surface transportation funds, so it's not necessarily earmarked for bike lanes. But I think it's fair to say, when we did put in the application for funding, we indicated that there would be a non-motorized component to it, and I think that made the application that much stronger, just because, it's an amenity that isn't there now necessarily. So no, there isn't funds directly earmarked for the bike, but I do think that were we to take away that non-motorized, then that we'd probably have to be working back through the grant application process and understanding if that would have any impacts with that. So, yes, sir. Let me get over to you here so that the YouTube folks can hear.
Yeah, a question about, you show construction. What level of construction? Will the streets be, will 10th Street be shut down? Will they be tearing it all up?
Yep. Yep. So yeah, level of construction, this is gonna be a full reconstruct.
Okay.
So this is gonna be, there's definitely a fair amount of pain. I won't sugarcoat it. And what we try and do, let me see if I can get to a spot here. Whoops. We do try and phase the project. And so, again, what I would see is we wouldn't open any of this stuff up right away, right? We would just open up a couple of blocks on the west end. And then as that stuff starts coming together, then we open up another block or two, get into a future phase. Now, one of the things I'll just share with you, it'd be nice to have this first phase all wrapped up and with a bow on it and done before we start the second phase. But the reality is that there's a pipe crew that's working here that we really don't want to go away. We want to keep those guys here so we get done early. So we typically open up the second phase before we finish the first phase, and then that, so on and so forth. So just keep in mind, a couple of phases could be open at once, but we are planning on getting things finished. So we got a follow on here, so let's hear that.
Yeah, as a follow-on, is there any consideration as the street is being reconstructed, creating something, what I would call along the lines of a shared street space, similar to what we have on 8th, particularly in the downtown area?
A shared street space.
Well, you know, the commercial district on 8th, you've got, you know, the sidewalk juts out in areas. The pedestrian traffic sort of flows naturally across the street.
Yep.
And that's part of the design. You
Yep.
see this commonly in Europe a lot.
Yep.
And it's
So,
become a hot trend. I'm wondering if
yeah, yeah.
that's a good-
Yeah, so like bump outs and things like that? Yeah, yeah, all right. And so, so that is what we're trying to do, and I know we lose some of the detail here as we do that. But, you can see some of this where it, and again, the scale's not great, but this does bump out at the intersections. The other thing that we're looking at, and this is in the campus, right, is these little, features here, again, are kind of what you're talking about. With mid-block crossings and things like that. So that's what we're looking at those. You know, the campus is a good spot for those, right? There's certainly a ton of traffic, pedestrian traffic, to justify those. And, you know, that's something that we'll evaluate throughout the rest of the project. But again, if we can have folks provide input on that, right? That's great.
All the way to time, you've got the two churches on the pastor of First United Methodist.
Sure.
Church. And we're the ones considering the affordable housing project with our sister church Hope across the street.
Got it.
And some sort of organic movement across the street in that section would
Sure.
be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So we know your plan, you know our plan. That's really going to be helpful. So, so it's great. We'll want to continue that discussion. So, yep. All right.
I have a couple of everybody here.
Couple of from the chat? Okay, anybody else here want to share? Again, there'll be another opportunity, so don't feel like any decisions have been made at this point or anything like that. We're still very much in the conceptual phase, and we won't get into the detailed design till after that second meeting. So, okay, so Mark, you've got the chat here. I'm going to give you the mic if you want to read that off. Just hit the button so it turns green.
The question is about public notice for when the trial bike pass this fall will be available for use.
Okay, public notice for the bike trail. I'm gonna have Cara that week. Can we nail down that week again? So move-in week for Hope College is the 17th, the week of August 17th.
Okay.
Is more than likely going to be the week. Now, one of the things that we're going to probably do is, if we've got your information, we'll probably send out the blast. We'll probably send out another mailing to folks along the route. It probably won't get to you, though, until a couple of days before you see the trial heading out. The other thing that we could do is potentially put some message boards out in advance. These are just the street side stuff that's electronic, and it'll flash what we're doing with the temporary cycle track trial. So, what do we have next there?
Connection to Collin Park at the end of 10th Street, crossing Van Raalte.
Yes. And I'm not sure if there was any more detail with that.
It was just, what are you considering?
What are we
for
considering? Yeah,
getting
sure.
to Collin Park at the end?
Yep. And there's again, some study in the past. We certainly want to spend some time looking at this. We don't have anything on the books yet, or any final design or anything like that, but that is an area, again, along with Lincoln Avenue, that we're hoping to, again, welcoming some input, but then also, we plan to look at it and have some more details for you at the next meeting.
What is the best way for people to submit input? Like, say, there's a
You bet.
what is the best way to?
Yep. So you can certainly contact us at the Transportation Department if it's transportation related. If it's utility related, you can contact the BPW direct or through us. But you can either call us at 928-2400, we're in the book, or you can email us at transportation@cityofholland.com. And those emails will get back to us. So yeah, those are a couple of options that you certainly have. And I would encourage you to, neighbors, things like that, welcome the input. That's it? Okay.
Can I say something?
Yeah, you bet.
Actually, I'd rather Ed start.
Oh, go ahead, I was just pointing to you, because you wanted to talk.
Yeah, here we go.
I just really want to emphasize, I live across the street from Collin Park,
Sure, on 10th Street?
and it's,
Yeah.
no, I'm actually on 11th.
Okay.
And it's terrifying watching the pedestrians nearly get hit. Yeah, that curve is awful. The fact that it's a truck route is horrible.
Yep.
That there's tankers going up and down, they can't stop in time.
Mm-hmm.
The speed limit's not maintained, it's not policed, there's no crosswalk signs. Apparently, it's, pedestrians do not have right-of-way, which is, that would be one of the biggest things if
Yeah.
if we made it,
Yeah.
that pedestrians had
Sure.
right-of-way and traffic had to stop for them.
Yep, and so let me just share, so I'm pretty sure that there's painted crosswalks there.
You can't see them.
Yeah.
They're not painted.
Understand.
They haven't been painted in years.
Yeah. Well, so the idea is there's painted crosswalks and some signage there. There are the dedicated crosswalks there, but I'm not saying that in and of itself is solving the issue, right? So I'm with you. So that's why we're looking at it. We're going to be taking a look at it.
There's a lot to look at the park entrance.
You bet. And that's also why we'd like to encourage input, right? So by all means, folks have ideas, thoughts, options. We'd like to hear them. Another chat?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you considering the Ann Arbor protected bike lanes with the bike lane outside parking instead of between parking and travel lanes?
So, I would say we're open to anything at this point. Yes, I would say that certainly would be on the table. I would encourage folks that have that desire to certainly convey that to us, via email or some letter form, things like that. And any ideas, transitions and things like that. That's one of the things with the cycle track that we struggle with a little bit is at these ends in terms of getting the cyclists back where they need to be on the right side of the road. It does present itself a little bit of a challenge. The other thing is on these signalized intersections, how do we want to treat those? But yeah, if I understand the comment correctly, basically having the bike lane next to the curb, and Mika, you can maybe help me with this, but the bike lane would be next to the curb, the parked vehicles would be between the travel lane, travel vehicular lane, and the bike lane. Did I say that right? I think so.
So double curb on one side.
No, this would, I think this is still one direction, one side. One direction, one side. But you're just swapping the parking for the bike lane. So whereas the bike lane would normally sit next to the traffic lane, the parking would be next to the traffic lane. And the bikes would be on the curb. Now so something that's coming to mind there, and again, is what it is, right, is the door swing on a parked car, right? I don't know if we necessarily want to have that swinging out into the traffic lane. And granted, nobody likes it out into the bike lane either, but that's why that bike lane is set up a little bit wider to allow a little bit of room for that interaction. So at any rate, we'll still give it a look though. And I would encourage the folks that provided that comment to, if you give us a little bit more detail about the Ann Arbor, we can look at it too. But I'd be curious what streets that's on, and we'd take a look at it. Okay, we good? Any other comments from the audience? All right.
Can we look at some of this stuff?
Oh, yeah, so we'll have some opportunity here, we have some plans, feel free. We're gonna go ahead and shut off the YouTube, I think, at this point. Well, we'll still leave the chat box open, but anyway, we'll get off the microphones, have an opportunity then for a little bit of one-on-one with folks. So thanks, everybody, for attending, and thanks to those that are online attending virtually, appreciate it. Okay.